the 9th economic study that we've done. We started in 2005, which gave us a baseline prior to the Bakken, which are pretty amazing as we've watched what's happened in the oil and gas industry over, I guess, now the last 18 years. So the fact that we had NDSU do that study in 2005 is one of the great things that I always refer to, where we were with 3,300 oil wells, 5,000 employees, indirect and direct in the industry. We were a $3.2 billion industry. And where we're at today with the results that the governor and Dean Bankson from NDSU will share with you. So we've got a kind of a tight timeline today, so we're going to introduce the governor. He's agreed to kind of roll this out for us today, so please welcome Governor Doug Burgum.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I know legislative session is a busy time for everyone, so sincerely appreciate everybody taking the time to be here today to learn about the incredible and significant impacts that our oil and gas industry has on our state, on our economy, and certainly it has a big impact on our policy and budget discussions that touch every aspect in our state. This is a critical time for this industry and for our state's overall economic health. As you know, the state's never been in better financial shape, and a big thank you to the oil and gas industry for that. But once again, we find under this administration that there's a lot of headwinds that are flying in the face of the oil and gas industry. And rather than an administration, rather than trying to optimize the U.S. energy security, rather than trying to sell clean U.S. energy to our friends and allies, we have an administration that instead would prefer that our allies around the world buy it from our enemies. So we've been making that case known to the powers that be in Washington every opportunity we have, and we've done that in a unified way across our industry partners, across our state leadership, working with the attorney generals, and whether it's pursuing federal court decisions or fighting the illegal suspension of oil and gas leasing on federal lands, which has a big impact on North Dakota. We're going to continue to fight for what's right, not only for the industry, but for our country and for the environment, because nobody produces energy cleaner and safer and better than we do in the United States. And if you really cared about the environment, you would want to have every single ounce of energy, whether it's baseload electricity or whether it's oil and gas and liquid transportation fuels, you'd want to have all that produced in the United States. So we're thankful here today to have the researchers that you're going to hear from today that talk about this, and they've got a background, importantly, not only in economics but also in agriculture. And we're at a position today where there's a greater opportunity for collaboration between our agriculture industry and our oil and gas industry than we've ever seen before. And whether that's carbon sequestration, whether that's sustainable aviation fuels, whether that's green diesel, whatever that happens to be, there's big opportunities for collaboration like we've never seen before. And for the citizens of the state that may feel removed from the oil and gas industry, I would just say if you understood the budget in North Dakota, if you've got a kid that goes to K-12 school, there's 125 of those in our state. If you've got someone who drives on a highway in your family in North Dakota, if you turn on your faucet and get clean water, our state has been so blessed by the success of the oil and gas industry, because compared to virtually any other state our size, what we've been able to invest in infrastructure, whether it's in roads and whether it's in water infrastructure, what we've been able to do to invest in our schools in K-12, all of that's been driven by the success and the productivity that we've seen from this industry. So it's a great honor that I have to thank the researchers and introduce them today. But Dean Bankson, research scientist in agribusiness and applied economics at one of my favorite schools, North Dakota State University, working with fellow NDSU researcher Nancy Hoder to study the economic contribution of oil and gas exploration, extraction, transportation, processing, and capital investments using 2021 data, the most recent data available. And as Ron said, it's been similar studies have been conducted every 2 years since 2005. I believe you're going to also hear from Brent Bogar, who I know is here, walked in together, senior consultant for engineering and consulting firm AE2S, who led a study for the Western Dakota Energy Association and the North Dakota Petroleum Council on the extent to which oil and gas tax revenues benefit local communities across the state. I also want to thank Ron Ness for kicking things off this morning, North Dakota Petroleum Council President, and also right up here in the front row, WDEA Executive Director Jeff Simon. Thank you both for the important roles that you play in working with our industry partners and with our communities. Dean and Brent will present the findings and studies here in a moment, but I just wanted to share a few high-level points about the powerhouse the oil and gas industry is in North Dakota. Ron gave some of the numbers from 2005. How have we come so far since then? The industry now accounting for almost $43 billion in gross business volume, nearly 50,000 jobs, and $3.8 billion in state and local tax revenues in 2021. The oil and natural gas industry continues to be a game changer for North Dakota. And these numbers, we talk about the billions in tax revenue. Think about the billions in royalty revenues that are paid to North Dakota mineral owners and how those dollars have flown back into communities and into philanthropy in our state. The taxes and royalties paid by our industry support our state's significant investments in infrastructure, schools, communities, tax relief, and of course, the Legacy Fund. What a gift we have in the Legacy Fund. $8.5 billion fund. The earnings coming off of that to help pay for so many things in our state, and that's such a gift that we have that many other states don't have, and it continues to grow dramatically. And the other piece that I think we want to say is when we talk about the industry's resilience, just in the last 6 years, we've seen demand drops. We've been through the pandemic. We had extreme weather last spring. Volatile prices, and of course these misguided federal policies demonstrate that the North Dakota oil and gas industry has the ability to not just contribute to be resilient, to persevere against all of these headwinds, and continue to make such a big impact. So with that gratitude, I want to thank everybody that's here from in the industry, all the entrepreneurs, and all the folks that have continued to make investments in capital in North Dakota to build out this industry. This has been a private sector success story like no others. It really turned around America. America was in decline in energy production in the early 2000s, and in recent years, we again achieved energy independence. But with that, I want to introduce our two economists that are going to speak today, and first we're going to bring up Dean Bangson. So Dean, come on up. Give it up for Dean.
Well, I know our time is short, so I'm going to keep this short as well. As been stated, this is our 9th measurement of the industry. We've been fortunate that we were in measuring this industry before shale oil development took place in the state. It's gave us a great insight on what's actually happening in the industry and the dynamics that are playing out and what it means for the North Dakota economy. I'd like to direct your attention to the graph that's on that poster that's sitting over here. When the industry started expanding, it was driven by oil field development and infrastructure build-out. And the growth was unprecedented, and we weren't sure where the industry was going. We weren't sure exactly how to handle it. We had a temporary workforce. We had a lot of growing pains going on in North Dakota as this industry was rapidly expanding. Move forward now to about probably the last 8 to 10 years, this industry has now matured, and we are now seeing the vast majority of the economic footprint for this industry is related back to production. And so what does this mean to North Dakota? It means we have a permanent workforce. It means that what's going to take place in this industry is going to be largely unaffected by the swings that we would see with oil field development, like what was taking place in the late 2000s and early 2010s. So I think this is one of the key takeaways that we're observing, is just how this industry is changing, continues to change, and the resiliency this industry has showed over the last couple of years. As COVID showed up, everybody was unsure how to navigate that. 2020 was a tough year for just about every industry in the state, and these numbers reflect 2021, and we can see here that the industry is rebounded and is very strong again in North Dakota. So briefly talking about the numbers, $42 billion and some change as far as the gross business volume. 29 billion of that is oil and gas production. When we look at the value of gas processing, refining, crude oil by rail, crude by pipeline, oil well drilling and completion, and infrastructure, I think I got them all, we're up to about 35 billion in direct output from the industry. So the remainder of between 35 and 42 is what has been measured that the industry is generating as the dollars industry spends flow through the economy. And that includes both the dollars that would transact between businesses and the economic output of the employees in the industry as they spend their payrolls and go about their business in the local communities. As far as gross state product goes, it's a completely different number than gross business volume, but it is the official measuring stick by which the government measures the size of your economy. This industry in 2021 represented over 30% of the state's gross state product, and over that same time period represented about 29% of the state's gross business volume. Those are extremely lofty numbers. Looking at employment, employment was estimated a little over 49,000, basically 49 to 50,000. That's down slightly from 2019, but we had 60-some oil wells, or 60-some oil rigs working in the state in 2021, and we had, low 20s in 2019, low 20s in 2021. So the rest of the employment in the industry has remained relatively steady. About 65% of the employment in this industry is related to production. And if you think of gas processing and you think of the takeaway and the transportation, the number goes up from there. So we have a very small percent of this industry is now tied to the most volatile part of the industry. Looking at state and local government revenues, this has been an eye-opener since we started looking at this industry. I don't know that a lot of people were aware of just the sheer magnitude of the dollars that this industry is generating in the state. We estimated that at 3.8 billion in state and local government revenues in 2021. That's about 37% of all the government revenues for both local and state governments. If we pull that back and look at tax revenues for the state, and the tax revenues the state collects that comes from oil and gas industry, that number is around 50%. So we don't have anywhere close to another industry in the state that generates that type of tax revenue from North Dakota. And as the governor mentioned, that enables this state to have opportunities for investment that few other states enjoy. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and let him talk a little bit about that study. And the idea here is we save a little bit of time for questions, knowing that everyone's time here is short.
Thanks, Dean. Just real quickly, Jeff Simon, Western Dakota Energy Association. We partnered with the Petroleum Council and the Petroleum Foundation last year and announced the results of this study early this session. And Brent Bogar is actually the guy who put all those numbers together, and he's going to give you a quick recap of, some of the amazing tax revenue benefits that, as you can see, have benefited the entire state. So I'll call Brent up. Brent Bogar.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity to share with you, and appreciate it. I think this is our third press conference that I've worked with Dean and Nancy in presenting this impact and the revenue distributions and collections of the oil and gas tax industry. And my portion of this really is this chart over here, this, the statewide benefits. Where does the oil and gas tax come from, and where does it benefit? And as the governor mentioned, the benefits for the state are throughout the state, whether it's K-12 education, whether it's water funding, infrastructure funding, all over the state. We see those benefits. And so when we look at this, over the life of the Bakken, it's over $27 billion in tax revenues collected by just the state, and where those dollars have gone to support infrastructure. And I think that's a key component, as it's been brought up. 50% plus of the tax revenues for the state are from the oil and gas industry. And so you can see, like I said, where that's generated, but it is benefiting the whole state. And that's the power of this industry in North Dakota.
Thank you. I believe we have some time for questions. Governor? governor's got a few moments before he's got to depart, so are there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, so we're talking about how much revenue oil tax brings in the state of North Dakota. And one thing I'm curious about is that the House just voted to pass legislation that would get rid of that bump up to 11.5% or whatever it is from the normal 10% whenever there's a trigger tax. Effectively doing away with, if that had been in place, this past biennium would have done away with like several $100 million in sale tax or oil tax revenue. Can you talk about sort of the idea behind that?
House Bill 1286 eliminates the high tax trigger, which is essentially a windfall profits tax. And of course, the offset to that was during the pandemic when the oil prices were real low, all those incentives went away and the industry continued to pay 10%. So the state benefited greatly, not only during COVID, but last June the trigger went on and over 5 months the state collected over $140 million, which we believe is bad tax policy. That money we want that money to go right back into investing in more oil wells, because in my opinion, the goal of the state to continue this economic growth, we have to sustain oil production at 1 million or 1.1 million barrels a day. That will give you the jobs, that will give you the incredible tax generation statewide. So I think it's a very important piece of legislation. It doesn't have a fiscal effect on this budget because the trigger's not projected to go on, but I believe it's an important message to an industry that already pays over 50 cents out of every dollar to the state of North Dakota. I don't know if the governor's got any additional comments.
Absolutely I do. Thank you, Ron. All well said. But we're in competition with every other state in the nation for capital to come to North Dakota, and whether that's capital for value-added processing for agri-energy, or whether it's capital to say where is a oil and gas company going to put their next drilling rig. We're also competing for talent. And so part of the tax policy change we're making, we're recommending eliminating income tax for 60% of North Dakotans and trying to get to the lowest flat tax in the nation. That helps us get the people. If we had more workers here, we'd have more rigs operating and these numbers would be higher. The windfall profits tax at the top, it's an interesting national debate right now. You've got President Biden, even during his State of the Union, attacking U.S. oil and gas companies for being too profitable. The reason why we've got high profitability is because there's a constraint on supply. When supply goes down, prices go up. Who's restricting supply? The federal government is doing everything they can to try to restrict the supply. So there's a absence of understanding of the raw economics, but if we're all opposed to the President of the United States calling for an excess profits tax on companies that don't have control over the price, then we shouldn't be trying to produce, we shouldn't in our policy here in North Dakota have an excess profits tax on companies that are investing greatly in our industry, not just in production, but also in value-added processing afterwards. Tens of billions of dollars of gas plant investment in our state. We have to make it attractive for companies to invest here, because if it's not, they will invest in the Permian. They'll invest in other oil fields, not only in the U.S., but perhaps around the world. And so this is all about us maintaining our competitiveness. Every time we get an additional rig going in North Dakota, it's the same as if I could go to a ribbon cutting for a company that's going to produce $200 million in revenue. That's what it would be. Every time there's a rig, the governor should be there for a ribbon cutting, because it's more important than lots of other ribbon cuttings I go to in terms of the impact. So anyway, we've got to make sure that we get that passed to make sure that industry officials, corporate executives, I've been there, I've been in the room as a corporate officer, CEO, chairman, when we were making decisions about where we place capital, and you put capital where you've got stable tax and regulatory environment, and North Dakota's got to get there.
Thanks, Governor. And I think your support for that is fantastic. And I think it was a very hard message to industry right when the market was ready to invest. Wall Street was ready to invest back in oil and gas, and our folks had to go to their boardrooms and say, the state of North Dakota is increasing the extraction tax 20%. Our costs went up too. We pay for all those goods and services. So, other questions?
So, in
Yes.
your estimation, what's the biggest impediment for getting more production?
Well, the biggest impediment for more production is really threefold, in my opinion. The federal regulatory climate, the messaging to the public and to the American public about the end of oil and gas, the regulations that we are just fighting every single day for. It is really, really challenging to go out and move the needle when your federal government essentially is telling the American public they're going to put you out of business, maybe in 10 years. Secondly, the workforce challenge is real. We have an acute need right now in the oil and gas industry. Finding, retaining workers. We had a million reasons, but you can walk outside today and that might be one, right? The jobs in the industry, when the Bakken took off in 2009, 10, 11, we attracted people from all over the world here. Today there are many oil shale plays, equal opportunities. So we like some of the pieces of legislation. We like the career and skill training centers. We like the new gateway to science. We like the re-energize opportunities that are talking about scholarships for families of workers. And thirdly, the capital investment and the competitiveness that the governor spoke about is where's that dollar going to go? We still aren't where we need to be with Wall Street and the investment firms on wanting to invest money into oil and gas. Anybody else?
I would just add to that, the workforce issue is multifold. I mean, one is income tax policy can help us attract and compete. Wyoming, Texas, Alaska, 3 other energy states have zero income tax in the entire state. That's who we compete with for talent. So we've got to not only get the lowest flat tax in the nation, we've got to put ourselves on a path towards zero income tax, and we can afford to do that. State's never been in better financial position. Number 2 is when we talk about workforce, we've got a comprehensive set of recommendations in front of the legislature around workforce training, the CTE. The CTE, we've already signed one of the first bills, getting $68 million out to these regional private-public partnership CTE programs. But there's another component in workforce, which is childcare. We know that if cities and communities like Watford City and Williston hadn't invested in childcare, a big portion of the Bakken wouldn't have happened. And so when we think about childcare, it is workforce infrastructure. We've got to figure out all the things. We've got a comprehensive plan that invests across childcare to make sure that we have that infrastructure. We've got a educated workforce sitting at home because of the lack of either availability, accessibility, or quality of or availability, affordability, or quality of childcare, and we can fix that. And so that's an important part of us getting our workforce thing. When someone's trying to decide, they used to come and say, can I get a house? Do we have a good school? Now when they come, one of the first things they ask about, there's like, well, we assume you've got good schools. I assume I can get a house. Can I get childcare? So if I can get childcare, I might move here. I mean, it's actually driving the decisions that people are making when they're trying to decide what state they want to live in. That's how critical it's become.
One final comment, I would say that, the ability for these numbers to continue to go up. I'm very glad NDSU did a similar study for the ag industry. Our ability to partner and utilize our rich, valuable natural gas to grow fertilizer plants, grow all the different types of energy, electricity from natural gas. But that is so critical on the ability to get workers into those areas that want those types of facilities. But the value-added opportunity for us to grow both of these industries together, I don't feel like we've ever seen it any better. So, any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Thanks, Governor. Thanks, Dean and Nancy.